All right, we are live. Welcome back, everybody, to our Wisdom and Wanderlust Wednesday webinar. My name is Michael Bennett, co-founder of ExploreX. I'm joined tonight by my colleagues and fellow travel designers, Robin Goldblatt and Amanda Jameson. And of course, we've got our guest speaker, Becki Rupp, with us tonight. On behalf of our entire team around the world, we are super pumped to have you back with us and to be able to listen into our chat with Becki tonight. If you are new to ExploreX or you want to learn more about who we are, what we do, what makes us so special, check out our website, explorer-x.com. And of course, if you're interested in talking to us, because we always love talking to our travelers and our friends, feel free to shoot us an email to travel@explorer-x.com. We're going to start with something a little bit different tonight before we hand it over to Becki. Before we chat with her about her best practices and what she does to help her clients prepare both mentally and physically for a trip, we thought it'd be fun to talk to our team about some of the things that we don't do or don't do consistently when it comes to preparing for our own trips. So Robin and Amanda, I'm going to throw this question out at you. What is one thing that you always tell your travelers to do to prepare for their trip, and yet you rarely ever do this when you're preparing for one of your own trips?
Okay, I will start. Michael, I'm curious to hear your answer too.
So it's a long list, Robin. It's a long list.
For me, it would have to be reading books about the destination or by an author from the destination. I'm typically always right in the middle of a book, and I like to just focus on one at a time. Yeah. So it's hard for me to get into that ahead of my trip, and I'm busy, planning everyone else's trips. So oftentimes I also find that during my trip, somebody that I meet along the way will recommend a book, and then I can pick it up afterwards. And I almost prefer doing that because at that point I have more of a context of the region, and I can better picture it and kind of reflect on my trip as I'm reading.
Yeah, I'm one of mine is what you said. I always am like, get books, and you know me, I'm a bookworm. Yeah. I've got books everywhere, and I'm always like, get a book, read a book. I'm going to buy you a book. Here you go. Check this out. And I, rarely do I actually do the same thing myself. So because like you, also I've got like 19 other books that I'm working on at the same time. So yeah. Amanda, what about you?
I too am not great at reading those things, but travel professionals, we are just some of the worst at self-preparation. We're fantastic at taking care of our people, but we're not always the best at looking after ourselves. Yeah. I may have once looked at a detailed itinerary for the first time on the way to a Malawi familiarization trip. Shouldn't admit that. Michael just raised his hand saying the same, but only once. And so yeah,
I've actually gotten to destinations and been like, cool, I'm here for a trip, what are we doing?
Oh gosh, no, I at least read it on the plane and was really excited about it once I read it.
Like going on our own like Project X, we don't even know what's going on, we don't
exactly
even know where we're going. It's perfect.
I knew about the destination. I mean, I sell it, so I was familiar with Malawi, so I knew what to expect and what to pack.
Right.
You didn't know the day-to-day plans.
Yeah.
But one thing I always recommend to travelers, and I always forget to do myself, is journaling. One, buying a journal in advance. And if I do remember, usually after day 2, I forget to continue journaling, and then I always regret it, and I always say, I'm going to do this next time. And I always tell everyone to do it, but it is unfortunately one thing that I often forget to do myself.
Yep. Fair enough. And for me, I think that there's a lot of them. This is a laundry list. This could be a full webinar based on what I don't do, even though I tell everyone else to do it. So I need to listen to my own lectures more often, right? But I think the biggest thing that what comes to mind immediately is travel insurance. Like it's something that we are pretty adamant about for a variety of reasons, and I know that it's good and it's useful and it's necessary oftentimes, especially now with what's going on. But like the number of times that I've actually purchased travel insurance for myself, just out of sheer laziness or forgetfulness, is like just about every time. So anyway, but we're going to learn from Becki tonight. Becki's going to tell us all the things that we can be doing, and we'll learn and maybe begin to integrate some of that into our own pre-trip prep practices. So, Amanda, we have housekeeping?
Yes, just a few quick things to go through. We are going to try to keep this to an hour, as close to an hour as possible. As Michael said, we are recording this and it will be available afterward. We will email everyone a link. And then last, if you have any questions as we go along, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Just go ahead and enter the question there and we will try to answer them as we go along.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Amanda. So we're gonna get started here in our conversation with Becki, and I think some background, some context is, as we just were talking about, when we plan for a trip or we talk about preparing for a trip, I know oftentimes we think about things like booking flights, booking hotels, maybe purchasing travel insurance, depending on who you are, that kind of stuff. And then again, maybe doing some destination research before we go. And it's rare in my experience that we really spend some time thinking about the physical part or the mental part of preparing for a journey. And so that's why we're super pumped to have Becki Rupp with us today. Becki's a health and wellness expert, and she's going to help us really think through these often overlooked parts of getting ready for our adventures. Now, Becki's a health and wellness coach and a personal trainer, and she really loves helping people get prepared for their journeys to really make sure it's the dream trip that they've always wanted. So she coaches clients to find motivation, time, and energy to get active so that when they can travel, they really get to fully experience the places and cultures that they're exploring. So Becki, we've had a chance to chat many times over the past few months, but it's fun to actually have you on our webinar. So welcome.
Thanks so much, Michael. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm excited.
Good to have you here. So tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you're up to now, and maybe even starting with the backstory. How did you get to be doing the work that you're doing?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it's been a long and winding journey, right? Like when you get to be my age, there's a lot of backstory, but I'll keep it brief. I've loved to travel pretty much my whole life. My grandparents traveled really extensively when I was a kid. And I just remember sitting in the basement watching the slideshows of all these amazing places. So the travel bug was fully installed early on. And then my love of fitness and, activity kind of grew over time. I was an active kid, but I really got into it the last 15, 20 years or so, and decided at one point to get my personal training certification and then my health coaching certification, quit my corporate job, decided to do that full time, and was working with a client actually, and she was like, I really want to do all this traveling. She had recently retired, and she's like, I just have not really focused on my physical activity over the years, and I want to be able to take these great trips and keep up and really enjoy them. And I was like, well, that's great. I definitely can help you with that. And so we worked together on that. And I thought, there's a lot of people who could probably, use this kind of help. And so I've been working on that and working with people. I work with people, in regular personal training just for, everyday life or various situations. But this kind of travel connection is really near and dear to my heart because I've been on numerous trips over the years that have required me to up my game. Hiking the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu and some other things that, really do require that kind of focus and dedication. And so to help other people do that is really exciting to me. It's a lot of fun.
I want to rewind a little bit. You mentioned and sort
Sure.
of passed through this idea that you had a corporate job and you just sort of quit it to follow this passion. Was there it's sort of two questions. One, was there something that happened, whether a specific event or moment that led you to just drop it and move forward? And then you kind of mentioned getting into this at about 15 years ago. Was there something specific that happened that really brought you into this world, or was it sort of a gradual?
Yeah, I guess I'll take the like overall, kind of active wellness part first.
Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of evolved mostly post college. Just you know, started doing more running and bike riding. I did some triathlons and just really found how much the physical activity helped me manage stress. It helped me feel good. Um, just it was so beneficial to my life and my lifestyle, and just became one of those constants. To get up in the morning, go work out, and then get on with the day. It really just helps keep me going. And then, just loving that and loving what it did for me kind of drove me to get the personal training certification. And and then I was working in corporate America. And it just had been too long. And I was doing sort of personal training on the side and health and wellness. I did work in the healthcare industry, which I thought would get me a little bit closer to helping people with their health. And it did to some extent, but then I was I really just want to see that direct, immediate impact on a more consistent basis. So I was I'm fortunately in a position where I can shift gears and do this full time. And so that kind of drove the decision. Just saved up the money and got things in order and said, now's the time. So yeah.
What was that like? I mean, was that decision difficult to make, or was it sort of just a natural, it just felt easy to do?
I guess, it was sort of easy conceptually and a little more challenging in practicality.
Sure.
It's one thing to talk about stuff, and then it's another to actually give the notice and get all the feedback and, oh, please stay. And, oh, we're going to miss you so much and all the love.
Right.
But, it was just time.
Did you have an oh shit moment, after you quit and you were like, oh my God, what did I just do?
What have I done? Honestly, no. If any of my former coworkers are listening, I love you, but I don't really miss it. And I just really kind of had myself ready to go. So it was a good decision. And it's been a challenge doing something totally different, and it's been great. I've learned a ton going to business for myself and all that. So that's a whole other conversation for another day. But it's been super rewarding to work with people again, and to get that to really get that direct, watching people light up and just listening to them talk about how much better they feel. And when that client I talked about before came back from her trip, she's like, I'm so glad I did all these things because I was really able to do what I wanted to do. And it was such an amazing trip. And she actually, she left right before COVID and had to come back and self-quarantine. She went to the Philippines. And so that was kind of an interesting dynamic as well. So she's back, she's healthy, she's safe, but it was interesting times for sure.
No doubt. What a journey.
Yeah.
Have you, how do I phrase this? What I guess, what have you learned, which I'm sure is another whole thing in terms of your own personal and professional journey, but if you could go back 10 or 15 or even 20 years and give yourself at that point some words of wisdom or advice, what might you tell yourself then?
Maybe not wait so long to move into my true passion. But I also think that things have a way of working out for the best, and that they kind of unfold in a certain way for a reason. I would tell myself to just keep the dream alive and keep going for it. And just when you're ready, just do it. Or maybe when you're not quite ready, but
definitely ready, aim.
Exactly. So
the perfectionism thing is a heavy shield to lug around, right?
It is. Yep.
So,
and the expectations and all that, wanting to be, want to be at the top of the game right from the get-go. So
Totally, totally. I was talking with my girlfriend last night about like, somehow I came up with like, what's the worst decision you've ever made? And this is,
Mm,
it was a fun conversation. I think where we both sort of landed was just that like, it's hard to say anything was a bad decision. I mean, maybe
right.
all of it helped us get to where we are today. And I'm not sure that I would change anything about where I am today. Right. So
Yeah,
it's hard to look back and say, well, that was a bad decision because it some way, shape or form helped get us here.
exactly.
So
Cool.
when, I mean, you said you were inspired by looking at your grandparents' photos and the slides and things like that. When did you start
Yeah.
really hitting the road and doing some traveling on your own?
Yeah, my first trip, I guess, technically on my own was when I was, I think about 10 or so. I traveled out to Iowa to visit my aunt and uncle. But I remember I flew through O'Hare Airport, which at the time may have been the largest airport, or was it definitely one of the largest airports. And, just I was okay with it. It wasn't, I look back at it now and I'm like, oh my God, like what the heck? But, at that time, the airline people escorted you from gate to gate and everything. But yeah, it was just a different time and place.
Yep.
I didn't actually start traveling internationally until I was out of college. And my sister did study abroad, which I was very envious of. And so I went to visit her in England. That was, I guess, my first foray overseas. But yeah, we traveled to Canada when I was a kid. We traveled a fair amount around the US. My grandparents lived in California, so we flew out from Michigan to California. So yeah, it kind of has been mostly in the States up until then, and more recently trying to get in an international trip every year. So yeah.
What have been some of the more recent international adventures that you've gone on besides?
Yeah. Went to Ecuador last fall, which was fantastic. Really enjoyed the session with the woman from Ecuador.
Maria.
I think, yeah, with Maria, and what an amazing country, and just so much packed into such a small space. And I think, my grandparents did travel pretty extensively in Central and South America when I was a kid, and I guess that stuck with me again somehow because I just were really drawn there. In fact, I recently, within the last few years, got a picture that my grandfather took of Machu Picchu back again. Like this was probably in the 70s or 80s, and my husband and I went there 5, 6, 7 years ago, and I didn't even actually realize that they had been there until I got this photo, and I was like, oh my gosh. So yeah, it's just kind of like that ancestral, or kind of draw for whatever reason. And no, I'm definitely a Northern European mutt, no South American, blood in my veins, but it just keeps drawing me back. So yeah, my husband and I have been to Peru, we've been to Ecuador, we've been to Colombia, so we just kind of keep going back there. But we've also went to Italy 2 years ago, my first trip to Italy, and that was amazing as well. So
Are you doing pretty hardcore adventures? I mean, I imagine you're, the sense of rivers and like, and
no.
you're, climbing 20,000 footers. What's your typical travel like?
No, I mean, I would say they're active and they're not super big adventures. We do the Inca Trail, the 3-day, 4-day trek. Usually involves some hiking, maybe some biking, paddling. My husband and I both like to paddle. I used to be, I once upon a time was a sea kayak guide. So I like to jump in the boat and paddle around a bit. Yeah. But yeah, no first descents of rivers. That's not my jam. But definitely getting out into nature and seeing things by foot, up close and personal, slow, exploring. Just love to explore.
Yeah. So now that you've got your health and wellness coaching practice, now that you've got your personal training practice going, what are some of the things that you do now differently when you're preparing for one of your international trips or domestic? It doesn't have to be international, but if it's going to be something that's maybe a little bit more physically demanding, what do you do to prepare for some of your trips?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely look at like what we're planning to do. Like in Ecuador, we were going to do a 3-day trek, village to village trek. and we didn't have to carry full packs because we were going to be staying in like hostels and huts and stuff, but just doing multi-day back-to-back hiking, which we're kind of weekend warriors out here in Colorado, honestly, even though everything's right here. It's easy to get lazy and kind of do a nice day hike and come home for a nice dinner and get the hot tub, whatever. But but yeah, so needing to stretch ourselves a little bit, push the mileage a little more, go to add some more weight to our pack than we would just carry on a normal day trip, day hike, and that sort of thing. So I'm definitely a planner by nature. So I always have kind of tended to plan those things out and sort of look at what we're going to be doing and then look at where we are now and sort of, bridge the gap and figure out, okay, well, if we're doing 5-6 mile hikes now and in 3 months we're going to be, one day on a weekend, and in 3 months we're going to be, going for 3 days or 4 days in a row with 10 to 12 miles, then, we start ramping it up and adding some more mileage, adding some more, weight and things like that. So I just kind of look at, closing that gap. That's one of the biggest things, and doing it incrementally so it's not a scramble at the last minute.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, I know every trip is different and depending on what the activities are, and of course the traveler's fitness level currently, right? But like, is there sort of a horizon or some kind of schedule that you look at and say, all right, X amount of days, weeks, or months before a trip you want to start ramping up, or is it truly just trip?
Sure. Yeah, it does depend, but I would say I generally recommend at least start thinking about it 6 months out and doing a real kind of realistic, where am I now look. And that gives you the good thing about starting to think about it and plan for it 6 months in advance is, life happens. So even if you're doing pretty good right now, you're, pretty active, and the trip is, definitely maybe, pushing you a little harder, in a month or two, something happens, it's a big project for work, a family member gets sick or whatever, then you have some, buffer time to kind of play with and recalibrate, or, back off for a little bit if you've been on a training schedule. If it's something really big, like if you're talking about doing like Kilimanjaro or, something that's pretty, far beyond your normal range, then definitely 6 months. If you're 3 months out and you're pretty active as it is and you're just kind of wanting to readjust, then that's cool. That usually works out pretty well. And like the Inca Trail, for example, you have to plan far in advance because you have to get the permit, and things like Kilimanjaro and many of those bigger trips, you're going to probably be booking, out in advance a fair amount anyway. So just thinking ahead about the physical aspects, like when you said in the intro, it's like, and I do this too, get all excited. It's like, okay, the flight, the hotel, the this, the that, like planning all the things. But then in terms of the practicalities of getting ready, it's easy to let that kind of slide. And then, time flies. Well, time's weird right now, of course, but, I'll book a trip in the spring and I know it's almost August. Like, how in the world did that happen? And, and then, you turn around and you're like, holy cow, it's a month away, that could be kind of challenging, but, most people make it through, but you may or may not have the best experience if you have kind of put it off or just, not really thought about it until the last minute.
What do you like? So you mentioned that you will look at someone's itinerary, right? So this is part of the work that we're doing with others. We design something, right? Yeah. We share that with you, and you work with the traveler to really think through. How do you help them assess where they are in terms of their own fitness level and all that? Because I know, like, we're all really, really bad judges of how fit we are or can be. So what do you do to help people assess truly, honestly, where they are and what they need to be doing?
Yeah. One of the biggest things is to ask them to track their activity for a week or two, and just, it doesn't have to be like every single step, but, write down how much you're walking, how much you're hiking. And again, depending on your itinerary, if it's a bike trip, how often are you biking right now? And track that for a couple of weeks. And and it's like tracking your diet, right? You think, oh, I'm doing really good. And once you start tracking, you're like, oh, those chips, oh, those cookies. It's kind of the opposite with the, with the physical activity. It's like, I think I'm super active, but actually I'm sitting in a car, sitting at a desk, or sitting in my house for like most of the time. And when you really start adding up the minutes and the activities, you're like, ooh, well, okay, that's kind of, it's more giving people insight into themselves. It's not that I'm trying to like, bust them on not being active enough.
I always feel like I'm like, when someone asks me, it's always like I answer as my aspirational self, not like my
right
self, right?
Sure.
I mean, this is true with anything, right? You're going through like any kind of, I mean, I love some of these assessments of like, the Myers-Briggs. I go through them like candy, but I'm always like, well, there's this one time that I did this thing, and that was that's that
exactly.
way. Well, the other 99% of the time I do it this way, but
right.
Hey, Becki, we have a question from the audience here. So this one is, what can people do to prepare for altitude other than being at altitude?
At altitude, yeah. That's a tough one. And, there are really fancy and expensive solutions, like going to like a special training facility or a chamber or whatever. But what I generally recommend for people is doing some high intensity training that will kind of push their heart rate and push their oxygen use. It's not exactly the same, and it is kind of interesting how people adapt to or don't adapt to altitude. But if you push your heart rate and push your oxygen use, that somewhat simulates the environment of, needing to breathe more heavily and that sort of thing, so that when you get there, it's not an unfamiliar feeling, especially if you're not somebody who's like kind of exerting yourself that much on a regular basis anyway. But yeah, altitudes, if anything, I live at 8,000 feet. So I'm really kind of lucky that way. But even still, I just went for a hike last weekend at like 11,000 feet and with my, neighbors, and we were all like, oh, we're kind of feeling it a little bit, and I have a friend who's like super fit. She's a big time mountain climber. She's climbed all the 14ers in Colorado. And a couple of years ago, just all of a sudden really started feeling the effects of the altitude. So, there's certain things you can do. You can get medication, which actually we took down to South America because we were like, let's just have it just in case. But yeah, the physical preparation should help you. It's not a guarantee. There are people, again, who are super fit who still struggle, but definitely if you're not fit, you will struggle. I can guarantee that. I see it all the time.
I'm just curious. Sorry.
Have you heard of somebody else just commented, have you heard of those masks that you can wear to like simulate?
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. You can do an expensive and or like really kind of interesting, options. Yes, there are, they're out there. And if that's really something of concern, I actually generally recommend that they talk to their doctor about it. Because to strap one of those things on your face and try to like hike up a mountain, I haven't tried it, but there's definitely some things that like serious hardcore athletes do to prepare for altitude. But for just a basic traveler, it's probably going to be too much, to be honest. Just try to get in as best shape as you can and just be ready to slow down. I mean, that's one of the biggest things is just take your time, slow down, drink plenty of water, try to get as much sleep as you can, taking care of your body, eating good, eating high quality food, not drinking as much alcohol or none at all. Those things all affect how you react to the altitude. So
this is I don't even know. I feel like I should know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask you because you're the expert. Is it merely a lack of oxygen or the reduced amount of oxygen that causes altitude sickness or issues, or is it other things that are going on physiologically that impact you?
Yeah, it's actually it's interesting. It's kind of related to air pressure. I just did a blog post about this. I don't think it's posted yet. But
Send it
the
to us.
air pressure, the higher you get, the less air pressure there is. So basically the oxygen molecules get spread out more, if that makes sense. So they're not as compressed. So there's not less of them per se. They're just more dispersed, or so you don't take in as much.
Sure.
And yes, there are various physiological effects that, that has on the body. But I am not that knowledgeable about all the details on that.
Fair enough.
But yeah.
Okay.
And you can take supplemental oxygen, of course. Pretty much everybody's heard about doing that in Everest and stuff. But even here in Colorado, you can get little containers. They're called, like Boost or something like that. And they sell them like at drugstores. I mean, I sell them all over the place around here. And that's supposed to help. Some of the higher altitude places also, like I know in Cusco, the hotel we stayed at in Cusco's at about 11,000 feet. They pump, certain hotels will pump oxygen into your room at night, which is really helpful for sleeping because it can be really, really hard on sleeping at altitude. In fact, my friend who kind of acquired this issue with altitude, she actually couldn't sleep at altitude above 10,000 feet for a very long time without getting sick. And, so having oxygen while you sleep is a really great thing. And then again, if you're at extremely high altitudes, you might consider, carrying supplemental oxygen. So yeah. And then there's oxygen bars at places around here where you can just go sit down and like stick the nasal cannula in and they put different scents in. It's kind of fun. It's in Boulder, right? I mean, I don't know if she ever went to the one in Boulder, but me and my sisters went there once. I was like, okay. I lived at altitude, so it probably didn't make a difference to me, but for some people.
I never tried it, but I've seen them.
You're familiar with it, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Becki, you mentioned briefly food,
Yeah.
And so it's another part of this sort of the idea of physical preparation is not necessarily just exercise and movement, right? But it's also diet and nutrition. So can you talk a little bit about that and what you do, or how you consult with and train your clients when it comes to diet and nutrition?
Yeah, I mean, long story short is you can't eat crap and expect your body to perform well, right? So garbage in, garbage out. And so, basically what I talk to my clients about and what I, encourage them to do is really focus on like plants and protein. You can't go wrong with plants and protein. They're fundamental building blocks of, a high quality diet. Try to avoid refined foods, really trying to, make the most of the stuff you find in the, they say the outer edges of the grocery store, stock up in the produce aisle. If you're vegetarian and vegan, there's different, options and opportunities for proteins that are non-animal based. But if you're not vegetarian or vegan, definitely the higher quality proteins, lean and, as natural as possible. So those things go a long ways towards providing quality fuel for your body. And yeah, fruits and vegetables and all those good things that your mama told you to eat.
It's interesting. We've talked earlier, in previous, I would keep wanting to call it episodes and podcasts, but it's not a podcast, it's a webinar. But if I slip and say that, just, I have aspirations of being a podcast host in my next life. So whatever. But we've talked about the fact that, a lot of the stuff that we do in preparation for travel can really, and maybe should be sort of foundational elements of our lives, right? So Jeff was talking previously about routines and habits and rituals and creating those as energetic platforms, that enable us to get through the day with as much fire and energy and passion as possible. So I think this is sort of the same thing, right? It's like, what are you eating? Are you putting in crap into your body because you're going to get crap out? Or are you actually putting in healthy, nutritious, right, food that is going to actually help you not only in your preparation for this trip, but really just as you go through life. Because when you get back from the trip, right, I mean, so much of what we talk about is maintaining, right, what you've grown and what you've learned, and the new routines and new rituals, and then using that again to as a platform for implementing changes, right, small changes that you are inspired to make when you get back from a trip. But if you don't have that platform, so anyway, I love what you're talking about, because it's so important just in general in sort of living. That's why we say travel better, live better, right? It's just, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, exactly. And, I get it. It's hard, we're busy, you're grabbing things to go, you're going to restaurants, you're going, well, some restaurants, maybe now, takeout, lots of takeout right now. But it's, but it really does pay off. And, I'm not perfect. I have chips. I have dark chocolate every night. Now I could argue that that's really good for you. Right? Yeah, exactly.
Right?
A glass of red wine and a piece of dark chocolate, that's okay. It's grapes and cocoa, stuff. Right. But yeah, and I wouldn't, and depending on, again, where a person's at and kind of what their concerns are, I suggest incremental changes, just overall. Like, don't just you can clear out your pantry and start over if you really are motivated to do that, but that's really hard to make it stick. It's easier to just make incremental changes, one small step at a time, and and give yourself a break every now and again. Otherwise you just, the pendulum swings back the other way a lot of times. So I just, encourage people to kind of, again, this is where keeping a food journal can be really revealing, and tackle things one thing at a time, and just say, okay, well, this is something that, I'd like to improve on, and just kind of work through that.
Totally. Yeah. It's, I think one of the things that, again, that we really encourage our travelers to do, both before and after, right, is to not try to bite off too much at one time, because it just ends up, leading to disappointment or, whatever. Right. And so if it's, we talk about what's the lowest effort, highest impact thing that you can do when you get back from the trip, right? And start there, right? And then once you've got that nailed, and that ritual or that habit, that whatever is done, that action is taken, cool, let's move on to the next one, right? But a lot of us look at an elephant and we're just like, cool, I'm going to try to shove the whole thing in my mouth, right? It's really one bite at a time,
Yeah. Right. And, it's just like those incremental steps do just make it easier to just kind of deal with that. Again, there's a lot going on in your life, and when you're traveling, your routine is thrown up in the air anyway. So you might struggle on your actual trip to keep your diet at a kind of way that you would like it to be. You're going to probably encounter some unfamiliar foods. You might have, your schedule is going to be different. But if you have that solid foundation in place, you can give yourself a little grace on the trip and just be like, hey, this is temporary, and, I'm going to do the best I can. If you really want to plan for it, you can, kind of do some work in advance to anticipate it, or you can just kind of go with it. And again, doing that preparation before is going to set you up better for the actual trip.
And one thing that's been coming up a little bit over the past week for me in different podcasts and conversations I'm having is, I was talking with a good friend of mine, Jill Robinson, and Jill's a travel journalist. She writes a lot for National Geographic Traveler and Afar, and you name it, right? San Francisco Chronicle. But she has an Instagram account that is called Tiny Little Victories or something like that.
Oh, nice.
If I had the exact thing, I would, or maybe we'll send it out tomorrow. But anyway, but the point is, she got so overwhelmed by looking at people post things on social media, like, I just did this ultra marathon, or I just did this crazy big thing over here. And she's like, yeah, I went for a walk at lunch today, but it was in the rain and I didn't really want to go. And but I went anyway. And I want to celebrate that, right? That's also a victory as well, right? We tend to ignore those, and only celebrate when we have these big things, whatever they might be. And that was sort of the focus of a podcast I was listening to this morning, right? Where they were talking about even the smallest things. If you've never meditated before, and you go and you sit down and you take, you do a 2-minute meditation, like celebrate that, right? Because it's good.
Yeah.
And I'm not the scientist or the biologist here, so, but there are chemicals that are being released in your brain when you celebrate, intensely and immediately, that help you want to create more of that and
Yes.
do more of that in your life each and every day. So let's celebrate the small little victories that we have as well.
Yeah, I wonder if what you were listening to was something related to BJ Fogg, because he
Yes,
has a book
it
called
was.
Tiny
Yes,
Habits, and one of
yes,
his, and
yes.
I saw him speak like, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago through my corporate job actually, and I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. This guy is like
Right.
totally nailed it,
Yeah.
and he does, and talk about the celebration and how that's really critical to cementing these little victories, these little habits, one bite at a time.
Yeah.
And, he says, break it down. And this is, again, something I've definitely incorporated into my coaching practices. Like, hey, let's not go, 0 to 60. Like you said, like meditation, hey, 30 seconds, like a minute, like, start as small as you need to start. It's, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be, you don't have to reach some huge bar to celebrate, and it really it will build over time.
Yeah. It's funny that you knew it was BJ Fogg. That's great. And
Totally.
a quick plug. So, we recently launched a membership program for travelers, and there's a lot of different benefits, and people can find that on our website /join if you're interested in looking and learning more. But one of the benefits for new members is a year-long membership to a website called optimize.me. And that's where a lot of this stuff that I get and that we read as a team comes from there. So super interesting stuff, very thought-provoking, everything ranging from like nutrition and diet and health to meditation to you name it. So anyway, quick plug for our membership program, and you can get a free year to that. A lot of what we're talking about here is really, we're sort of bleeding into the idea of mental preparation. So specifically shifting to that, what are some of the things that you do beyond what we've already talked about that help your clients really prepare for the mental part of the journey ahead?
Yeah. So one of the things a couple of things that we work on just to kind of get people struggle with motivation, right? Like that's the mental piece of it. Like we all know what we're supposed to do and blah, blah, blah. But the motivation is a big thing. And so work with people a little bit on how to kind of get their motivation up and keep it up, or regain it if they lose it for a little while. And, there's various ways to do that. And one of the first things I like to do with people is just kind of dig into why this is important to them, dig into that really deep, I call it like the 3-layer down or 5-layer down, like asking yourself, why is this important to you? Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to take this trip? What do you really want to get out of it? And when people articulate that, when my clients articulate that and really dig in and discover, they may have not even thought about it that much. It's like, oh, I've just always wanted to go there. Okay, that's cool. But when you dig down deeper and really tie into that why and your values and how it kind of ties in with who you are, it gives you that intrinsic inner sense of, why I should keep doing this, even when it gets hard, even when there are other things going on. And that may not be enough to just motivate you day to day, but when things do get hard, to be able to at least reflect back on that can really provide us a helpful, context to restart for people. So that's one thing that I do to work with them on that kind of mental preparation. Another thing is to kind of like reflect on is tap into their strengths. So we all have our, kind of our strengths, the things that we come naturally to us. We may not even realize they're our strengths because they just come so naturally to us. But I like to help people like can think through that and maybe discover it again if they haven't really thought about it or explored that before, so that they can tap into that in their preparation. So, if you're a really good planner, you're really good at planning, but you just haven't, been really effective in planning your activity. Well, maybe a structure, really good structure is what will help you kind of get that going and get that in place. If you're more of a wing it kind of person, like, that too you can work with that as well. And understanding those strengths will help you build that program. And I like to take a collaborative approach. Like, I can give you a training plan. I can write it all up. I can shoot it over to you. But if you can't get motivated to do it, kind of on your own, or it doesn't fit your lifestyle, or it doesn't fit your strengths, it doesn't fit how you really enjoy doing things, it's just so much harder to do it. So that's part of the mental preparation, is kind of digging into like, how's this really going to work? How are we going to get this done? How are you going to stay motivated? Like, what kinds of things will keep you on track?
Totally. No, I think that question of why, and being able to identify, that, and I think one question that I like to ask it, with certain clients, depends, right? Everyone's different, is what's at stake for you, right? If you know what you want, but what if you don't do that? Like, what does that mean, right? How does that impact the experience of life that you're having now? And what would happen if you actually did this thing, or reached your goal, or your whatever it is, right? Like, how would that benefit you? And that oftentimes I think can really give people a sense of inspiration, motivation, whatever, to sort of really get through this. Because as you said, we can't do their push-ups for them, right? So you only provide some of the tools, the resources, the guidance, the whatever, and then it's up to the traveler, to us, whomever, right? To, I say us as like, as a traveler, right, to do the work, right? So
yeah, and that's kind of like, and personal trainers have different ways of motivating people already, but that's where the health coaching piece comes in for me, and why I really pursued that was around supporting people by more than just, again, giving them a list of things to do. And some people are really good with that. Like, some people are like, just give me the plan and I will go do it and get it done. Great.
Right.
Cool.
Right.
But for most people, and especially if you really want to make a long-term lifestyle change, most people can do the plan for a few weeks, right? Like, okay, I just got to get to the trip, right? I just have to get ready for the trip. But if it's going to become a long-term lifestyle change, then you really need to, it's much more effective to do it in a collaborative style, and to do it in a way that, again, like, is manageable for you and is incremental, so that you can maintain it. And even if you do fall off for a while, you can come back to it, because it's something that you helped craft and that means something to you, and will, kind of support you in a long-term way, and not just well, I just need to get back on the wagon for, another 6-8 weeks. And then I can, lay off again.
Right.
Yeah.
I got one more question for you, and then we're going to move on to the rapid fire and all that.
Okay.
We are obviously in an unprecedented period of time, right? With COVID and the pandemic. And travel for a lot of folks, certainly international travel, is not really an option. Are there any things that you can think of, either from a physical preparation, perspective, or from a mental, like trying to find that motivation to do anything, that you can offer that helps people kind of get through some of the mental difficulties that we're all experiencing right now?
Yeah, I know. I'll be honest, like, I'm kind of struggling too. I have lots of things on the list. The list is long and distinguished of places I want to go and things I want to do, but it's kind of on an indefinite hold. But I think the advantage is that you can start looking at those little things, right? You can start doing maybe just some small changes. And I also would not say during this time, I would say, don't try to take on something huge anyway, because you're already dealing with so much stress and so much change and so many things that are different, to try to like go from like, oh, I'm gonna like, go climb a 14er, and I've never really gone hiking before, for example. Which, I hear some people kind of doing, because they're like, oh, hey, I live in Colorado, even though I haven't been really a hiker. Now I'm going to go do a 14er because I'm stuck here. But that's, kind of, again, to go back to what we were saying before, that might be a little too much as well. So taking on those smaller things, the things that, will set you up for the future, just changing out one thing in your diet, or just adding one thing into your activity routine. Being active and being outdoors both are proven time and again, many studies prove that, helps people's moods. It helps your, the endorphins, all that good stuff. So just getting outside and moving is a good thing, right? So, and don't make it too big, start small again, little things, and, still kind of keep your eye on the prize. And then know that someday, I mean, one of my big trips is to go hike in the Alps. Right. And, I'm like, okay, with those days that, I go hiking, I'm like, okay, this is preparation. I can still use it as motivation, even if it's not specifically on the calendar for a date.
Yeah, I totally agree with all that. I love it. I think there's a couple things that we've been sort of chewing on as a team, and and have heard from conversations with other colleagues in the industry. One of them is, look, if your dream trip is to go to the Alps, right? I mean, there's obviously you can do local hikes, but let's say your dream trip is to go to, I don't know, Vietnam, right? Like, simply what books can you read, right, to learn more about what famous authors come from there, right? Can you take a Vietnamese cooking class, right? Like, what are some things that are related to that destination that, even though you may not be able to plan that trip right now, you can still sort of, in a way, virtually begin thinking for and getting excited about that. And again, things that are small, like doable, right? Because so much of what we're dealing with now is uncertainty and the unknown, right? So if we can, I think as humans, we all have, different degrees of tolerance for uncertainty and things like that. But I think that,
for sure,
I know I feel out of balance right now. I think most people feel out of balance just in terms of, like, if there's too much certainty, right, then it's boring, right? But if there's too much uncertainty, then it's disorienting, right? And we need a degree of certainty. So what are some of the small things that we can do that will get us these small, easy victories? And if you can tie that to, hey, I really want to go to this destination, so let me read this book, let me take this course, let me blah, blah, blah. And so a quick plug for a future date, Robin and Amanda and I are working on some of these virtual experiences. So we are already working with our team members who might do walking tours of Lisbon, with a GoPro or a phone, right? Or cooking classes, Vietnamese cooking classes, right? Or all these different things. So we've got a new partner that we're going to be working with hopefully soon that offers language classes, right?
Oh, nice.
So trying to provide those kinds of things. The last thing I'll say, because this is not about us, it's about you, but like, there was an article that came out this morning and I posted it on our Facebook page about, it's not too early to really start planning your next trip. Now, there's pros and cons to that, right? Like, the reality is there's a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of travel companies that are not going to make it through this. So, like, there's hesitance to say, sure, give us your money. We're going to plan your trip for 2022, right? Not on our part per se, but of course everybody says that, right? So there's that element of it, but then there's also the psychological benefit of being like, wow, I've got something to really look forward to. I'm super pumped about this. I get to plan, I get to be creative. I can have this trip down the line. I can start doing these things and it gives you something to really get excited about. So
I've seen that too. And I've actually, even before this, like, I'd seen studies or, and articles around that. And that definitely got me through a few corporate fire drills. Is like, okay, the trip is coming, I'm gonna get away. But to go back to like the kind of like related experiences related to your destination, your dream destination or whatever. Another cool thing is, like, cooking classes are super popular. I love it. And that is definitely really fun. But like, recently I did like a belly dance class, or there's like, dances or physical activities that are indigenous to the country. I mean, there's a YouTube video for everything. Like, check it out, follow along, do some movement and fun, different things, dance around your living room, get into the spirit and the kind of the whole vibe of the place. And I think that could be a lot of fun. And all the different martial arts and different things from different countries, I'm kind of fascinated by it. Like, Brazilian jiu-jitsu and Thai. I was doing Tai Chi yesterday morning, and there's lots of ways to bring in an experience of a country or destination. So I think it's a good opportunity to get creative on that front.
Awesome. Becki, it's been a ton of fun before. If
Out of
anyone
town?
wants to connect with you, Becki
Yeah.
at explorer-x.com, BECKI, and we'll make sure you get connected to them. And then thank you again. It's been fun, and we'll have more information about how people can work with you in an email that goes
Cool.
out tomorrow. And again, we're continuing, behind the scenes. Our team is to continue to work with you on putting some of the programs and products, services, coaching, etc., on our website as well. So if you're listening,
Perfect.
stay tuned for that soon too. So, Robin.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks,
Yeah.
Becki. I want to say I feel like we're cut from the same cloth, Becki. I also feel like there's something really there's something that draws me to Latin America over and over again, and just like pulls my little European self back there. So I can relate to that.
Cool.
But yeah, so now for the fun part, we get to do rapid fire questions. I've got
right.
a handful of these. So
Okay.
again, this means we'll ask you a question and you'll respond in either a one word or short phrase answer, whatever comes to your mind first. So are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay,
Do
cool.
it.
So if you were to summarize your philosophy in one word or short phrase, what would that be?
Ooh. At the risk of sounding like a brown noser, I would say explore. I love to explore.
We'll take it.
Yeah, that works. If you could go anywhere in the world right now, where would it be?
Oh, Australia. Been on my list for a really long time. I was supposed to go for my 50th birthday, but that didn't work out. So.
Oh man, 51st maybe.
Maybe. Probably not. That's coming up pretty soon.
What is something that you always tell your clients to do to prepare for their trip, but then you never do for yourself? Going back
Tables
to
are
our original
turned.
question.
Yeah, I think, and I don't really push this too hard with my clients, but meditation I know is really beneficial for people, but I'm sort of a periodic meditator.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like I'll get on board for a little bit and then I'll fall off the wagon again.
Yeah.
But I think it's so beneficial.
It is.
What is one essential item you always bring with you on your trips?
Oh, honestly, a credit card. That sounds boring, but you gotta have money to
It's
move around.
essential. Yeah.
Yeah. Or my hiking boots,
Yep. Yeah, that too. Okay, and
Comfortable shoes.
last but not least, what has been the most impactful pre-trip practice that you do?
Yeah, I think it's just that it's not one single thing. It's the accumulation of the things that I do over time. So yeah, I can't point my finger to just one thing. It's just that assessment and planning and then making it happen.
Yeah.
Just
Awesome.
to interject, I wonder if it's just the fact that you are doing preparation and you are doing planning, right? Because again, I think a lot of folks plan their trip and then they just forget about it until they head to the airport in a lot of ways, right? So doing anything, whatever that looks like for you in terms of physical prep, mental prep, destination prep is important.
Yeah. I just kind of obsess about it. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Becki, thanks again. It's been super fun.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Robin.
Yeah,
Amanda.
thanks, Becki.
We'll have you back on soon. Next week, we've got our very good friend Åsa Chung from Sweden. Åsa's awesome. I had a chance to travel with her in October this past year, and we went on a week-long rewilding adventure through Sweden. Super fun, super dynamic, very diverse. I think she's been an actress, a musician, a lawyer, and now a conservationist and a teacher at a local college. So you name it, she's done it. She's super fun, super exciting. So that'll be at 9 a.m. Pacific time next Wednesday. So information's already on the website for that. Again, if you have questions for Becki, it's Becki, BECKI, at explorer-x.com. If you want to connect with us, travel at explorer-x.com. You can visit our website or follow us on social media at GoExploreX. With that, Robin and Amanda, thanks guys. Becki, thank you again. And we'll see everybody next week.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you guys. Thanks, Becki.
All right.
All right, see ya.
Bye.
Bye.